Welcome to Module 7. In this module, we'll learn to make copies of tables, update existing data, and insert and delete rows. Problem 1. Write a statement to copy the entire contents of the appointment table into a table named Appointment Copy. To make a copy of the appointment table, we use the select into statement. So we're selecting star from the appointment table into a brand new table called Appointment Copy. When we run this statement, the new table is automatically created and the data from appointment is copied into it. So we have an exact copy of the appointment table called Appointment Copy. Notice that in the Object Explorer, you can't see the new table yet. So here's an opportunity for us to use the refresh button to refresh the object shown. And now we can see that the new table is listed as part of our database. Note that when you use the select into statement, you don't have to copy the entire table as we did here. You could add a where clause to this statement and use that to specify which rows you wanted to be copied into the new table. So for example, you could specify in the where clause that you only wanted to copy over rows where the appointment site was 6 or whatever criteria you wanted to use to determine which rows get copied. We'll be using this appointment copy table for the rest of the module, so make sure you don't confuse it with your original appointment table. We're going to make all changes to the appointment copy table. That way when we're done we can delete it and we'll be left with our database in its original state. Problem 2. Revisiting Module 5, Problem 7, management has decided to go forward with the 10% discount for all existing bills at Beachview South, Site 5. Write a query to apply the discount for all Site 5 bills, as well as to add 5 days to the due date of these bills. Hint: research and use the dateAdd function to calculate the date that is 5 days later than the current bill due date. Here's a statement that will apply the discount. We use an update statement to update existing rows in the database. For the rows where appointment site is 5, we set the bill amount equal to the bill amount times 90%, which applies our 10% discount, and we have a comma. And then we're also setting the bill due date to 5 days after the current bill due date using the dateAdd function. You can make multiple updates to the rows by separating them with commas in the set clause, or you can just make one change if that's what you need to do. Problem 3. The doctor staff ID for appointment 3023 is currently null. Change the doctor staff ID for appointment 3023 from null to 1030. This is an example of just changing one value. We're updating the table appointment copy and setting the doctor staff ID to 1030, where the appointment ID is 3023. Problem 4. Management has asked you to give all patients who live in Treeville a bill due date extension of 4 days. Write a query to update the appropriate rows using a subquery. For this task, we used a subquery to update the appropriate appointments. So we update the appointment copy table, setting the bill due date to 4 days later than the current due date, where the patient ID is in, and then we have our subquery that selects the person ID of people who live in Treeville. Just like you can use a subquery in any clause of a select statement, you can use a subquery in any clause of an update statement. So you can update a table and set a column equal to the result of some subquery, or you can update a table and only update certain rows by using a select statement in the from clause of the update statement. Problem 5. Update date and time values in the appointment copy table to match the values in the appointment date time changes table. To write this update statement, we have to join the appointment copy table with the appointment date time changes table. So you can see I've joined the two tables by appointment ID. We're updating the appointment copy table and setting the appointment time in the appointment copy table to the new time from the changes table, and setting the appointment date in the appointment copy table to the new date from the changes table. Only the dates and times of the 3 rows where the appointment IDs match will be updated. The last thing I'll mention about the update statement is that you need to be careful. If you don't specify a where clause, all records will be updated, and most likely that's not what you want to do. So going back to our problem 3 solution, if we were typing out this query and got distracted and forgot to type the where clause, so this was gone, we'd just have update appointment copy, set the doctor staff ID to 1030. If we were to run that statement, then every single row in the appointment copy table would have 1030 as the doctor staff ID. So make sure before you run an update statement to really read through it and make sure you're doing exactly what you want to do. It would also be a good idea to double check that your statement ran as expected. So you might do a select star from the table you just updated and review the data to make sure everything looks good. Now let's move on to inserting and deleting rows. Problem 6. Insert a new row into the appointment table. You can choose the values for each column in the new row. Include at least one null value in your new row. First of all, let's take a look at the design of the appointment copy table. If we right-click on Appointment Copy over here in the Object Explorer, then click Design, we get this design view of the table. What I want to show you specifically here is the identity specification for the primary key, which in this table is the appointment ID. So with appointment ID selected in this top section, I'm going to scroll down until I see identity specification. And then I'm going to expand the information about identity specification by clicking the little arrow to the left. So we can see that the value for isIdentity is yes, identity increment is 1, and identity seed is 3000. So for this table, this means that whenever a new row is inserted in the appointment table, the database is going to automatically assign a value to the appointment ID field. We know that because isIdentity is set to yes. The appointment IDs are going to start at 3000, the seed, and be incremented by 1 each time a new row is inserted, because 1 is the identity increment. And If you select star from appointment copy, you'll see that that's true. The appointment IDs started at 3,000 and went up by 1 each time. Of course, it looks like I've deleted a few rows here and there, so it's not always 1. Since the database is automatically generating the appointment IDs for each row, we don't have to specify a value for the appointment ID when we go to insert our new rows. There are a couple of different ways to approach this task. One is we could write the query this way. We have our insert into keywords, then the table name we want to insert into, appointment copy. Then in parentheses, we list the names of the fields we're inserting. And note that, as we discussed a minute ago, we don't need the appointment ID in this list. Then we have the keyword values, and then in parentheses, we list the values we want to put in those fields. And we have to list our values in the same order as our fields so that they match up. So you can list the field names in any order up here. Just make sure your values match that order so they don't get put in the wrong fields. Another way we could do this is to not list our fields, just list our values. If we do this, we have to know the order the fields were listed when the table was created. We could find that out by looking at the design view of the table or the statement that was used to create the table. If we do it this way, we have to specify a value for every column. So here we're including 2 null values because we want the values for bill amount and bill due date to be null in our new row, and those are these last 2 values. You can insert multiple rows at a time. By having the data for each row in its own set of parentheses with commas in between, like this. Problem 7. Delete one of the rows you just inserted. To delete one of the rows we just inserted, we can simply select star from this table. And look for the row we want to delete, which will be among those with the highest appointment IDs. In this case, I'm going to delete the row with the appointment ID 3066. So I run a statement that says delete from appointment copy where the appointment ID is 3066. Be careful here because if you run the statement delete from appointment copy without a where clause, all the rows from appointment copy table will be deleted.